Karin, how are you?
It's doing great, Matt. Thanks for having me.
God bless America. I'm so happy to be talking to you. And I'm really happy to be here. Like it's so cool to be talking to people in San Ramon Valley Unified again. And, obviously you've been here for a long time. I was here for a long time. I recently moved out of the area, but I've been following education in and out of the state of California. I moved to Idaho. It's really interesting to see how the sausage gets made in different states and the different priorities. And so I'm super pumped to be talking to you about what you want to be doing with San Ramon.
And I'm so grateful that you're here. It means a lot that you'd come back and do this with me. So thank you for having me.
Of course. So listen, San Ramon has 5 board members. Okay. They're on 4-year polls. Now, the board members, the 5 board members, they direct the district, right? They hire the superintendent. They give the direction for everything. These are the elected representatives of the people. The people working in the district are not elected by the people. So you're running for one of the 5 spots in Area 2 to be the voice of the people for this public school. Why are you doing that?
That's a great question. So this came about organically a few months ago. So just a little introduction. I've got 5 kids in the district. I've got 2 at the high school, senior and junior. I've got 2 at the middle school, 8th grade and 7th grade. And then my youngest is in 4th grade at Greenbrook Elementary School. And a few months ago, people started talking like, hey, a couple seats on the board are up for re-election. And then a few different people were like, hey, Karin, you should really look into this. You should consider it. And I was like, I didn't know a lot about the re-election cycle at the time. And I had a friend in particular, she's a school teacher actually. And she's like, you should really look into this. You should consider this. And over the next few days, the thought wouldn't leave my mind. And I wasn't actively looking for something to go do, right? I have got a very, very busy household right now. And the thought just wouldn't leave my mind. And I was like, you know what? There are some things I would like to see changed in the school. And I feel very connected to my community. I feel very connected to my neighborhood. And I feel very connected to teachers and students. I think having the 5 kids in the district really give me an in with what's currently happening because I see it at every level. I see it talking to my friends, and I hear a lot from my kids coming home from school or their experiences with teachers and different things. And so it just kind of, a few months ago, these conversations started happening, and then it just kind of snowballed. And then I met with some great people, and we just got the ball rolling. And here we are.
Yeah, it's really clear after. And again, I was working with San Ramon Valley kids for college entrance since 2004 until just right at the beginning of 2022. And there is a large population of people that have observed and experienced the changes and shifts in public education in this area for a long time. They're just kind of like, I don't really know what to do. And so the fact that you had people that were like, hey, please do something and, represent us, the people that either don't feel comfortable doing things or don't have the time to do things, I'm not surprised at all because there are the silent majority is a real thing. Now, what those people want or what the issues are, that's a bigger question. So when you're talking about, hey, I had the support immediately, totally get that. But you're also saying that there are things that you didn't like, that you're like, these things could be better. What were those things? Because they're like, what is it? What is it? If you're representing the people and you're representing the direction of the district in the public world here, what is it that you think could be better?
The first thing is just the academics. Like I said, I have a senior and a junior, and they're working their tails off and getting ready to graduate and go into the world. And I want them to feel competent. I want them to feel ready, and I want them to go take on their next challenges and know that they're going to have opportunities for them to grasp, right? And I want them to have that educational background and foundation to give them that confidence, right? We're doing the best in our house that we can, but I'm seeing things at the school. We look over the last few years and our scores are dropping consistently the last 5 years, if not longer. And it's an excellent school district. Before we moved here, people told us about Danville. People told us about the district. This is where you want to live. And we found that to be true in so many ways. We love it here. We don't have family here, but this is where we've decided to raise our kids. And we love our community and we love our teachers, but we can get back to excellent, right? Like we're slowly or kind of quickly now dropping into an okay school district, and there's no excuse for that being in the East Bay. We should be one of the best in the nation, not just doing okay. And so I just want more support for our kids to get the academic foundation they need before they're going to go take on the world.
Why do you think we are? Like, because this is, first off, I don't think you're wrong. Like, people can say, hey, Karen doesn't know what she's talking about, but quantitatively, you're correct, right? And this is, yeah, people can point to COVID. We're 2024 going into 2025. So, like, okay, yeah, that was bad a couple years ago. There's no reason why that trend should have continued. So there's obviously something happening here that is either detracting from the academics or hampering the academics. Like, what is it that you feel is really driving the drop in scores?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of things. We're going to have to look at the broad picture, right? And I'm tired of hearing COVID as an excuse. I'm tired of hearing COVID as an excuse for academics. I'm tired of hearing it as an excuse for sports. Like you said, that was 4 years ago, and other people are picking up and killing it in other parts of the country. Like, COVID's a reality. It changed all of our lives. And that was not a fun couple of years to live here. And it was especially not fun to educate our children here during that. And I mean, you saw it.
That
So
was
many
terrible,
people left
yeah.
the state, right?
Yeah.
And trying to educate our kids from home for 2 years was really hard, online and what. But I mean, that was the reality. But it's not an excuse anymore. And I think that our focus has been diverted to other places. And something that all of our students need in this district is support from their schools. Something our teachers need is support from the district. And we need to work as a collaborative effort, parents and teachers together, with our students to give them their best foot forward and help them succeed.
Yeah. Yeah, the focus has, and to your point, for instance, the school district that my kids go to now, public school, and when I moved up to just outside Eagle, Idaho, I was hell bent on like, oh, we're going right into private schools, and people told me really quickly, like, okay, that's fine. Like, there are a lot of private school options up here, but the public schools are really good. I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, we mean the public schools are good, and so we started looking into it and decided to give it a shot. And to your point, they just clocked the West Ada School District, which is almost a carbon copy of San Ramon Unified, just about 40,000 people. Eagle itself is almost a carbon copy of Danville, which is interesting. But you have the school district that is receiving very low funding, even per state averages. Again, similar to San Ramon Valley.
Right.
But they just clocked the highest scores in history for the ISAT, the Idaho Standard Achievement Test. So to your point, there are people, we all went through tough spots, but other people and other districts are picking up and going. And it's kind of like, if people want to, we only have two options with our scores. We either say, hey, this is remnants of COVID. And then the question becomes immediately, okay, when will that no longer be an excuse?
Right.
Or we say, this is not a remnants of COVID. And then the question is, what are we doing then? Right? We're just taking ownership of our dropping scores. How do we well, first off, do you have an opinion on what you think the focus is? Because I know that in talking to a lot of people back here, it's plain as day. Like, people talk about equity, they talk about inclusion, they talk about a lot of different things that are very, very important to a portion of the population, which is fine. Like, no comment on that. But important to the detriment of academics, or important at what cost, or taking priority at what cost, is a larger question that I don't think people are addressing. So do you think it's that diversity, that equity, the inclusion, that emphasis, and like identity, like let's help the 10-year-olds figure out what their identity is, that's detracting from academics? Or do you think that there's some other cause?
I definitely think that plays a huge part in it. I think our focus, I mean, you hear about teachers' trainings and they're being trained on those things instead of trained on this brand new curriculum that is just dropped off at their desk the day before school started. Like, I went in with my fourth grader to see her third grade teacher. So excited to see her. It was one of her favorite teachers. She was a phenomenal teacher. And she showed me this brand new curriculum that she's so excited about for reading and writing, but she was literally given it the day before back to school night this year. And it's like, why is that how we're using our time? Like, why aren't the teacher trainings last year preparing them for new curriculum so they don't have to stand up in class trying to get through it and teach it brand new, right? So I think that's a big part. And you said, like, it's important. These kids, no matter how they identify or what they're into, or, all the different things, they need to feel safe and supported at school. And I believe that firmly. And I will advocate for all of the students. But as a school district, we need to focus on the 30,000 at large and stop focusing on what divides us. Get these divisive topics and divisive politics out of school, because we're all sending our kids to the same schools. And let's focus on the things that benefit them all. That's their academics, right? That's their safety. And I think that we need to stop introducing conflict to our children. You walk into an elementary class and you've got every culture, race, religion, identity, upbringing, socioeconomic status. You have all of it there. And they're interacting and they're friends and they're getting along. We don't need to go in and point out their differences, right? And if there is a personal problem or struggle or need from a student or a family, then that's something that they should be talking with the teachers about and collaborating together for the best of that student. But as a whole, we need to give teachers the opportunity to go back and focus on teaching what they were hired to teach.
One interesting thing is you're talking about different priorities for people. The district spent north of, I believe it's $3 million. I don't have the exact number, but I believe it was over $3 million on equity liaisons, right? So when we're talking about focus and priorities, right? There was $3 million plus of taxpayer dollars spent on our school district to focus on, idealistic things, or I don't want to say ideology, that's a charged word. But the point is, equity liaisons that were not like academic liaisons, like, hey, let me find the struggling student who's like not great at math, or let me find the student who's really, really good at math and not getting challenged. Let's spend $3 million to have these essentially snipers go in and academically improve these individuals. Like, no, we're going to spend that money on equity and, across all campuses. That program has since been discontinued. We no longer have equity liaisons. But do you think that's a good move to have those, or do you think that that's money that should have been allocated somewhere else?
I mean, I think that you just look at what's happened in the last 4 or 5 years, and what we're seeing in the results show that it's not the best use of our money. We're a low-funded district already, so every dollar needs to be accounted for. Every cent needs to be accounted for. We need to be really diligent on where we're spending our money. And you're saying it's upwards of $3 million. I would love to use that $3 million to go find really amazing teachers and pay them enough to make them competitive here, want to stay here, be able to afford to live here. At our high school, my kids are at San Ramon Valley High School. There are cohorts and cohorts of kids dropping math from the district and taking online. Now, most kids, including my own, prefer the in-person learning from a teacher, and it's still a better option to drop math altogether and take an online course in hopes to get a better education, to prepare them better for their tests, their AP tests at the end of the year and things like that. And I just think we need to be more competitive with how we're reaching out and hiring teachers, and we need to protect really good teachers and somehow find a way to evaluate them and hire and keep them based on merit and results. And I've talked to so many teachers who feel the same way. So no, I don't think that's a great use of our spending. I don't think it's responsible. And I don't think that's actually what anyone really wants the money to be spent on. I have friends in all of these communities, and they want the focus to be back on education too. I also think we need to stop sending kids to school to be labeled. A teacher was talking to a friend of mine, and then a parent came in and was like, yeah, my kid came home from school and was like, Mom, what's my thing? And she's like, what do you mean, what's your thing? They're like, what's my thing? Like, do I have ADHD maybe? Or do I have this? Or do I have that? And they were trying to find a label to put on themselves to help them stand out. And I just think, those things exist, right? All of our kids have a variety of different needs. And they're all important, and they all need to be addressed with their parents and home and with the teacher when needed. But the fact that we have our students showing up at school trying to figure out what their thing is, what's going to make them different enough to stand out or get the attention from school, is sad to me. It's like, let's just all go to school together. Let's be respectful and kind, and let's go get a dang good education and show them what the East Bay can do. I mean, that's kind of my thought.
Man, that's really... So I have 3 boys. They're very high energy. No surprise, right?
I wonder where they get it.
Yeah, right. And that is something that is really the idea of labeling, especially young men, and having issues with them with energy or saying like, okay, you essentially need to match the gold standard of elementary education or something like that, which is, as it's very clear in literature, it's like the gold standard for elementary education is a young woman who sits quietly on like her little carpet square and does exactly what the teacher says.
Right.
Enter my kid, the exact opposite. Like she's a hot dog rolling across the room, knocking kids like a bowling pin. Like it's, yeah, that's really sad. I hope that kid can get over looking for whatever label he's, feeling he needs to find. So here's something for you. As you're pointing out, San Ramon has a rich history with a very rough math department, which is like the open secret in the district, which everybody knows, like San Ramon's math department is not the best. There are systemic problems with fixing that, though. There are like structural issues. First off, as it was explained to me, they're like, look, the real problem with the math department at San Ramon is actually the principal turnover. I was like, help me understand that.
Yeah.
Like you have good teachers, you have bad teachers. What's with, like, look, here's the thing. Every time a new principal comes in, it's essentially like I believe it was a 3 or 4 year track to get rid of a teacher that is underperforming. Because what they first have to do is, and again, don't quote me on this, but I'm 99% sure this person was in the district who was explaining it to me. They're like, we have to have a principal there that observes the behavior. Then there has to be for a year. And then there has to be like a warning year. And then there has to be a probationary working with you year. And then I think it's like, it might be over after the 3rd year, but for sure the 4th year, if there is, it's like, okay, you get one more shot year. And then if you fail the 4th year, then going into the 5th year, you're gone and they get somebody else. But the problem with San Ramon in particular is that you have turnovers with principals more frequently than that. So you have principals that are coming in trying to get their bearings, but then they only last like 3 years,
right,
and then they move on. So yes, I think it's really important to attract and retain really good teachers, but it always starts with leadership.
right.
Right. So how do we cultivate better leadership and better structure in leadership and retention with high quality leadership within the district?
Yeah, we definitely need strong leadership. And that's a frustrating situation because 3 to 4 years, that's a student's entire high school career.
Right.
Right. And I had an experience. I was frustrated with something at the high school and I sent an email about a teacher. This was before the year started. And I said, hey, this would really benefit my student if they could have this teacher. This would work with their learning style. And I respected the school's initial response. It was like, hey, we can't take teacher requests. There's too many students. That makes sense to me. But the second thing was, and we here at San Ramon, we stand behind our teachers. That's an all warm, fuzzy thought. It's great. But we need to stand behind our students. And if it's going to take 4 years to get rid of a bad teacher, that's unacceptable. But I will say I'm really hopeful. Our district just hired a math coordinator. I don't know if one math coordinator is going to be enough to go around the whole district, but it's a start in the right direction, right? I'm also really excited about our new superintendent. I think he's going to be awesome from what I hear. And so far, he seems to have the district's needs more at the forefront of his mind than maybe superintendents in the past. And I've heard that from teachers too. I actually, I have a lot of friends who are teachers because they're in my community, they're at our schools, or I've coached their kids on softball teams, because a lot of our teachers have kids and students in the district too. So they want these things as well. But anyway, I told a friend that I was going to run for the school district months ago, and she started crying. And she said, for the first time, Karin, in a long time, I feel some hope. And she said, with you running, that's awesome to represent parents and teachers. And she said, and also this new superintendent is giving me hope for the first time in a long time. And I think it's true. Sometimes you have these positions of leadership. The superintendent really should be listening to the school board, and the school board should be listening to parents and teachers in the community. That's the way it should work. And I don't think that's the way it's always worked here and in other places around the nation. But sometimes you have these superintendents that show up that, they feel like they want to go write a book, and they come and they do their thing and then they leave. And it's kind of like, well, we're left with the mess.
Right.
And so I just think that strong leadership matters. I think consistency matters for kids, right? Constant change in their leadership, whether it's their principals or their teachers or whatever it may be, can be tricky. And I think looking at the last 4 or 5 years, what's happened is not working, and we need change at that level so that we can be more consistent in our schools.
One thing you said that the second part of the email is, hey, we stand by our teachers. And again, that's a good thing. Great. I happen to also be on the state PTA advocacy board. So, and speaking with the president for, again, the state of Idaho, speaking with the president just the other day, she said, look, there's some odd culture in education of not wanting to accept any negative feedback or criticism or like addressing. And she herself has a podcast and meets with educators all the time, as do I up there. And it's interesting because there is this sentiment of like, no, we believe our teachers, all of them, under every circumstance. And it's, again, what you're saying is we stand by your teachers. Okay, to what end? You stand by your teachers. Why? Are your teachers always right? Are your teachers always the best? Is there no situation where maybe a teacher is not performing as well for a myriad of reasons? And it could be that you have a great teacher who's in a bad situation, who's under-supported, or who's doing whatever. But why the sentiment of we stand by our teachers instead of, hey, I noticed you're requesting someone. First off, we don't take parent requests. Sorry about that. But just could you offer me some feedback? What is it that you're concerned about with this teacher? Because we want to make sure that not only do you feel good about the teacher that you're getting, but if you have concerns about this teacher, then we iron that out. And that could be more teacher support. It could be more resources. It could be, just sitting down and having you guys meet. Like, how about we have you guys meet and you can just flush things out? But there isn't that connection. There's not that like, hey, I understand we do support our teachers, and supporting our teachers means also taking real feedback from people and figuring out what that is. So you don't go into the year feeling like you have this second tier option.
Right. No, I completely agree. And supporting people doesn't mean you agree all the time. Like if everybody in the room has the same opinion, there's no progress. There's no conversation happening, right? And this situation, I also wish it was easier for the students at these schools to change their schedule for whatever reason they want to change their schedule. I remember when I went to high school, I would meet with my counselor and say, hey, I actually don't want to take this class anymore. And it was a really easy switch. And I thought maybe that's changed in the last 20 years since I graduated. But then I was talking to my friend who lived in this district, has since moved to Utah, and her kids started school this week as well. And she was telling me, I was talking about some schedule changes, frustrations that I was having. And she said the week before school started, they had their counselors in a room at the school and all of their computers out on the table, and any student could come in, sit down, and they would just hash out their schedule with them, change it on the spot. None of these in-depth requests or waiting or, well, that reason's not valid enough to change. And sure, you can't put a kid in a classroom if it's full, but if there's all the counselors there and all the students coming in, there's movement and there's conversation happening. And I loved that idea. And I was like, I would love to see something like that happen in our schools where the feedback from students and parents were being heard by the teachers. But like you said, it helps the teacher too, because it opens up a conversation. It's like, oh, like if I'm not doing a good job, like I want my friends to be like, hey, Karin, like I noticed this or this happened. And I'll be like, oh, it'll give me a chance to reflect. Maybe I agree with them, maybe I don't. But at least I can reflect and be like, you're right. There's some truth there. I could do better. I'm sorry. Right. And I also think that's a problem with leadership too, is the inability to admit mistakes or shortcomings. And I think we just need to be realistic about some of the choices we've made and how we've spent money or time or chosen to do different things and say, yeah, that wasn't the right move. Let's get back on track.
Right. So in doing private education, again, I did SAT prep from 2004 until 22, and in this area, right? So I got a lot of feedback from people, but it wasn't compulsory education, right? This was totally elective, and getting feedback from people was absolutely core. And you have feedback, just tacit approval of the program if people continue showing up. But then if you got feedback either way, either positive or negative, that people explicitly went out of their way to give you, that was also really, really important. And especially with negative, I remember very, very rare that somebody would come into the class and then not want to come back. It was like 1 in 200 kids, right? And whenever that would happen, it's like, okay, wait, what happened? Because this kid seemed to be like jiving or like, what's going on here?
Right.
And it would take, I remember it's happened like twice in the 4 years before I moved. But I remember each time I would be on the phone for like a half an hour, not saying, hey, your kid's the problem, or I stand by my program, or like you're wrong. It's help me understand. 100%, like no problem. I'm sorry it didn't work out. Could you just do me a solid? Like, what was it? Right. And I think one of the problems that you have when you have a captive customer base, as a public school system does, is you lack that motivation, right? You're not obligated or kind of obliged to really engage deeply with feedback because that person's going to be showing up or not. But when you have this situation like you're talking about at San Ramon, where people are opting for remote education, when everybody agrees, like I've met maybe one person who's like, oh yeah, remote education's better. Like 99.9% of people prefer in person. So if people prefer in person, but they're electing to do not in person, that is feedback. So the idea that it's like, hey, we stand by our teachers. Okay, again, it's not that you shouldn't, but there needs to be some manner of feedback, positive criticism, structuring, and connection between the school district and the parents. Because if it's just a wall of we support, then like you're saying, there's none of that, like sit down with people and hash things out.
Right. And I support our teachers. I love our teachers, right? But just like, I mean, I have 5 kids, and all you have to do is you have 3 boys. All you have to do is have more than one kid to realize they are vastly different. None of them are the same. And then you have classroom sizes, depending on the level of school you're at, anywhere from 20 to 40 kids. They don't all learn the same. They don't have the same interaction style. They don't have the same learning style. They don't have the same skills or talents. And we need to meet all of the students where they are and give them the resources needed. But with this teacher situation, it was frustrating because not long after that email, I think we lost 3 teachers at the school for a variety of reasons. But one of them, because he was not a safe teacher. I mean, a police record came out about it later. My daughter had him as a teacher at one point, not knowing about any of this. And that, I don't want to get too sidetracked on it, but I'm like, yeah, you should stand behind your teachers.
Until the police come.
Right?
Until like, the police how does that work out?
Or until, I mean, I would love to see the number of students who are opting out of math in our district. I can only speak for San Ramon specifically because that's where my kids are, but I literally can name a dozen plus students, and I've heard of other cohorts that have done it too, that have opted for remote learning. And it's like, okay, so what teacher or teachers are these students enrolled in that they're dropping out of, and why?
Right.
And let's have a conversation. Let's implement new things. A math coordinator, I think that's so fantastic. They're going to hopefully go in and see the methods of teaching or what's teaching. For me, part of it too is a method of communication. Like when students would go to a certain teacher with problems, they weren't getting the help they need. And I mean, your career was helping with SAT scores and stuff. Yeah. As a parent of 5 kids who, we love it here and choose to live here, but it's not enough, like a super affordable place to live, right? We make sacrifices to live here. And we're at a district that was broadcast to us. When we moved here the first time, my daughter, my oldest, was starting kindergarten. And it's like, this district is amazing. It's so strong. And it's like, yeah, the Bay Area, we should be the strongest. And over the years, I'm like, it's great. But I am talking to my friends, I'm talking to my kids' friends' parents, and they all have personal tutors. Even my 9-year-old has friends who is in tutoring for reading, for math, for different things. Now, there might be the extremes where you need extra help, but it actually feels like that's quite the norm here. And I'm sorry, who can afford that? I can't afford to put 5 kids in personal tutoring, and I don't want to even if I could. I have an expectation that the school is going to provide that for my child.
Yeah, listen, you're right. And I was saying this years ago, I will repeat it right now. People in this district, on average, spend between $10,000 and $15,000 per kid per year for auxiliary education. By the way, you want education for or auxiliary education for 5-year-old? Literacy Express. They're great. They'll do reading, they'll do math. They have a great program. But you have to, let's not joke about this. The scores, one of the funny things, maybe not funny, haha, but funny things about, let's say San Ramon's quality of math math when it comes to students going to college. I can tell you right now, there were dozens and dozens of students per year that slayed the SAT on the math portion because I helped them. Not because they were coming out fully formed and ready to rock, but because they were literally coming to me saying like, oh my gosh, I didn't learn anything in geometry, or like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything about this one subject. It's like, okay, let's go. Like, you're going to get it. It's no problem. Like, we'll get you there. But yes, I think at some point people have to call a horse, which is San Ramon doing the best it possibly could to educate students, or is San Ramon doing an okay job and then the educated parent population with a lot of resources so they can help their students themselves, or they can hire outside people like me? Is that really what's carrying us, or at least to some degree? And if you want to stay like, okay, it's carrying our scores by 10%. We need to close that gap so it's less, right? Or you're saying, no, it's not helping our scores at all. Fine, how do we know?
Right.
Like, just help me understand, like, how are you assessing the situation? Because you could you stand anywhere you want in Danville, anywhere. You go downtown, anywhere you want. You stand in front of norms. Throw a football. You could hit an education center somewhere, somehow, very everywhere. Easily. Why? Why is that? Why is it like we did have four Thai food restaurants downtown? Why? Because Thai food's awesome and they make great food, and there was a market for that. Well, guess what? There's a market for auxiliary education, and these centers, and again, nothing against them, but I can tell you right now, millions and millions of dollars, each individual center. I know this. This was my industry, and I was a one-man shop. These centers have dozens of tutors, not bad people.
No.
They're not responsible. Like, these centers are not the ones making the curriculum. No. They are dealing with the problem with the plumbing. They're plumbing service. They're like, look, you got a clog. Like, we're just here to help.
Oh,
you have to take responsibility for that.
I mean, yeah, I'm not knocking the tutors. I have friends who tutor.
I hope you're not. That was my whole life.
Yeah, right?
My whole life.
I mean, in fact, I was with one yesterday, and she's brilliant at math, and she tutors a lot. I'm like, I'm not trying to put you out of work, but this is unacceptable that you are tutoring. I'm tutoring so many, right? I don't want to bring my kids into it personally. I want to respect their privacy, but I'll talk about my husband. When he was in high school, he went and to his counselor, and his counselor was like, this is not pushing you enough. This is not rigorous enough. He attended a high school in northern Utah, and they changed his math to put him in higher math classes. He graduated high school having taken BC calculus and not doing any of these summer programs that we offer in our district. Like, my kids keep having to do math over the summer to bump them up. Like, other places you can just do that by opting into it because you want to. So he graduated BC calculus AP, and he's not, like, math is not, something that he was going into. Anyway, long story short, he did that, graduated. It saved him like a year and a half of college because he passed all these AP tests, and he wasn't getting outside tutoring. He just had phenomenal support at the school. A counselor saying, hey, you're not pushing yourself enough, and teachers who adequately taught it and followed up and gave him the resources needed to succeed where he could retain that information. And I was like, yeah, we should have that option. Now, I'm not saying everybody's going to go that path, and that's fine. But my oldest, she did an ACT prep course, and then she came home and studied on her own for like 2 hours a night before she took the ACT. And that's great. She did well. I'm so proud of her. But first of all, not every kid has 2 to 3 hours or like the mental capacity or desire, drive to do that. But she wasn't getting that from her school.
Right. And again, I really want to be clear on one thing, that at least from my side of the table, I don't think we're saying, hey, teachers, like, we need more support for everyone. Right. And if you have I don't think there's a single teacher who ever went into education who's like, I know, I'm going to ruin some kids' day. Like, that's not the jam. But just like you were saying, you have to meet kids where they are. We have to meet our teachers where they are. Like, as a community, we have to meet our teachers where they are. We have to recognize these are flesh and blood individuals who have parents that pass away, who have sick relatives, who have problems themselves, emotional, physical, the whole thing. And as a school district, I think it's really important to recognize, hey, we need to figure out how we can spot teachers who are struggling themselves and be there for those teachers and be like, look, we want to help you. One, because you're one of us. You're part of the community. but two, because we are asking something from you. And yes, there's an exchange here. We give you money to do this, but it's more than that. We want to make sure that you're doing okay. Like, we need to meet both parties where they are so that we can get the best out of both the students and the teachers. And again, like the whole issue with San Ramon, it's like, is it possible that somebody's having a rough time? Is it and yeah, look, there are plenty of people who will say, hey, look, somebody's just terrible at teaching. They hate teaching. It's like, okay, look, that's possible.
Right.
But I would venture a guess to say that's probably not the average case, right? Teachers are not leaving just because they're like, oh, I thought I liked kids in education and like I actually just hate them all. It's like, no, I don't think that's true. I think it's more of the situation, the taxation, the lack of support, the lack of connection with community, because you develop this adversarial relationship with the community. Because now it's like every time you want to talk to the teacher, you have to go through the admin blows you off. They support the teachers, blah, 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 blah. It's like, we need to come back together.
Yeah.
We need to come back together.
And also, how much of our teachers' time is spent on other things besides, like how much of their time are we taking for other things, for different training, for things that don't give them the adequate time to prepare for their classes or to have the time to meet with their students, right? Like, what else are we requiring from them that actually doesn't have to do with the course they were hired to teach?
Right.
But I love those thoughts. I mean, so many of our teachers are part of our community. You know, I would go and scorekeep. My daughter's been playing on the basketball team the last few years, and I would go scorekeep, and I'm sitting next to teachers who are there. I love our teachers, and so I'm grateful for that point, because I'm not bashing on teachers. We need to give them the support they need. We need to give them the financial backing they need so that they can live here, so they can raise their kids here, so they can teach here. But I love the community and how it is so blended. So many of these teachers have students in our district, and which means they need all that support too, right? Like, we really do need to come together.
As a community.
As a community.
On all levels.
Yeah, we need to move forward together. It isn't I'm in charge, or I'm taking credit for this move, or I'm doing this or that, or blame this or blame this. It's like, let's have some conversations, find out where we're struggling, make some changes, and move forward together.
One last question for you. There are state laws that are in place that tie school districts' hands in the state of California with a number of things. Gavin Newsom recently came out with another law making it saying that school districts they no longer have the ability to require people, inform parents if the student is having some kind of gender question or whatever it might be. There are things like that. There are also things with, say, reproductive care, right? So there's state law in California. If a student age 12 or older comes to the school district and says, hey, I need transportation to reproductive health care, and don't tell my parents, the school has to actually provide that. So you could have a 12-year-old going to get an abortion, for instance, at a clinic and come back to school, and the school cannot tell the parents. And then the kid goes home, and it is what it is. And again, that's not a policy that has been invented by San Ramon. These are things that are mandated by the state. My question is, there is criticism of California school districts, or the philosophy of California public education, that those structuring it feel that they're co-parenting with families, and that in some cases that the school district must maintain that school districts must maintain kind of a protective role between parents and students. Like, we can't tell you this stuff because it could put your child's safety at risk because we don't trust you, or you might be dangerous to them. So we, the school district, we're going to protect your kid from you. There are things that are mandated by the state to this, but to the degree that you have flexibility as a board member, do you agree or disagree with that sentiment?
Oh, it makes my blood boil. And the reality is, I have so many friends who are gay or have gay children. I have family members who are transgender, right? And I've talked to a lot of them about this, and it makes them upset too. We are the parents. Like, why does the school district get to pretend they care about my child more than I care about my child? And if a child is going to, let's go with like the pronoun thing, right? Because the first week of high school in their syllabus, they're asked, What's your pronoun? And what pronoun do you want me to use in front of your parents? Why are we introducing a wedge between a child and their family? Like, there's a difference between a child going to a trusted teacher or outlet or a peer group. I support that. I support if the LGBT community has a support group at the high school of peers where they can have commonality and someone to relate with. I think that's a beautiful thing. I think everybody needs that for whatever they're going through, right? But to create a divide, to create a secrecy, like that feels very predatory to me. And when you're trying to separate the young from their parents, like that's what a pack of wolves does. And I also think it's important to look at the bill that Newsom just did, because the wording in it says administrators are no longer obligated to tell the child's parents. It does not say they cannot. And I've spoken with my friend who is a student counselor, and there are still, I can't think of the word right now, but there are still parent acts in place that kind of trump that. And anytime a kid's safety is in jeopardy or danger, they are required and obligated to tell the parents. So we have to be careful, and we have to watch our district closely to make sure they are not fudging lines or creating their own interpretation of this. Administration's not obligated now to tell if a student comes to them. But let's look at the student body as a whole, right? How many of our kids do you think in this area, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, are coming from such a dangerous place that they can't go to their families about things? Like, we're promoting this and talking about it like it's the norm. Like, this school district has the child's best need, or has the needs of this child as their
Has best interest in mind.
best interest in the
right.
child's needs more than the family. Like, that's ridiculous. And not only that, like, that puts so much pressure on these teachers.
Right, who showed up to teach history or math. They're like, wait. You want me to take this child's safety at home? I've like met these parents once. Like, you want me to interject and now make a judgment call on whether or not to, and when do you, like, how about this? Where's the line? Okay, we are popularizing the idea that when it comes to gender dysphoria or transgenderism or whatever you want to call it, people's gender identity, whatever it is, we're popularizing the idea that that's the line that gets drawn with like, okay, this is where we need to look for safety. What if a kid gets an F on a paper? Right? Like, what happened to the pissed off parent who's like, you're, whatever, like you're grounded, or you're like crazy, super upset, or, like the kid's going to commit suicide because he or she can't go out and do things because they got bad. Like, where do we start drawing the line? If the school district takes this on and is like, oh, I'm the primary protector or I'm like a middle ground here. It's like, no, that's the police. That's CPS.
Right.
Did you ever see that horrible Tom Cruise movie, Minority Report? Well, I mean, it wasn't horrible. No. Tom Cruise makes good movies. He's a weird guy, but he makes good movies. But the idea of that movie is that they could somehow, it was like a sci-fi movie, and you could somehow tell the future of somebody's actions, and they would arrest and charge people based on future crimes that they hadn't committed, right? Which is the same thing here. I know that if I tell your parents this thing right here, then this exact thing will happen for sure. And therefore, I'm going to intercede and I'm going to not do that. It's like, what world are you living in? Like, first off, you're not even giving the parents an opportunity to behave in a way that you think would be a good idea, or to behave in the way that they think is best for their family. You take no responsibility for the fallout of this. I've spoken with many parents years ago and more contemporarily where they're like, okay, let me get this right. My daughter was flipping out and losing her mind because this crummy history teacher was putting all of this stuff in her head, and they literally saw her for like an hour a day for a school year and then disappeared, and I had to deal with this girl who was crying in a mess all weekend, and then they moved away. She's like, within 2 weeks, my daughter was back to normal. There was no problem. She didn't have other random adults who have no seat at our kitchen table, who have no responsibility for the damage that is being done, having these ridiculous conversations with her. And it's like, how do you do that? Like, in good conscience, how do you do that with young people?
Right. Well, and I think it comes down to respect and transparency, right? Like, I was talking to my friend. They have family members that are gay, that are older. They're around their kids all the time. right? And, but they're not like, they don't introduce conversations to the children without the parents aware. Like, how would you like me to talk to your child about my new partner? That's kind of the conversation. It's about respect. It's about transparency. And we also have to accept that, like, 30,000 kids in our school district, they're all coming from different homes, right? Some of them have two moms, some of them have two dads, or different cultures, races, backgrounds. But you're going to look at this gay couple and this gay couple, they're not even going to make decisions the same way as each other, right? Like I was on...
Right. It's not like there's a
it's
handbook or like an
and
agreed
it's
upon
not.
protocol, or there's not even that within the heterosexual community.
There's
Like,
not that
I
between
don't
anyone.
want a random dude talking to my kid about his relationship with his wife. Like,
Right.
why would you do that? It doesn't matter. You're gay, you're straight. It doesn't matter. Like,
Right. Well, and at the elementary school level, it's, especially in middle school, it's so confusing. Right? Why are we talking sexuality at all to kids who probably have never even heard the word sex? Or, you know what I mean? Things like that. But I was talking to my friend the other day, and I was telling her, I was like, you are my friend who happens to be gay. Like, why are we labeling? You walk in the door and it's like, you have a label. I have another friend whose son was gay at the high school. I'm like, is that the only thing that, like, he wants to be known for?
Right. That's the least interesting thing about anyone I've ever met. Like, why? It doesn't matter. Like, it is so irrelevant for our functioning as human beings. Like, whatever it might be, maybe I like tall people, maybe I like short people, like maybe I like whatever my preference is, it doesn't matter. Yet we make it this beautiful, shiny, like, this is your thing. This is your thing.
Yeah,
This
and-
is your thing you're going to carry.
Well, and how unfortunate that, like, that has to be their thing forever. Like, oh, well, my gay friend. It's like, no, how about my amazing friend who's this incredible dentist and brilliant? And if they want to talk about it, they can talk about it. If they need support, we need to have support there for them. I am not saying that we shouldn't be supporting these students who are struggling with things, but to take that right to have those conversations away from the parents in the home, I'm not even having the conversations about maturity and different things with my kids all at the same age because they're so different. Some of them are more emotional than others. Some of them are more intellectually ready for that conversation. I'm the one that is with them 24/7, and I'm saying, hey, this kid's not ready for this conversation yet. Or if they ask a question, I'm scared they're going to ask somebody at school a question. The question's going to be misinterpreted, and then it's going to be like knowledge vomit or information vomit on my child. It's like, whoa, like that just confused me. It's like when a kid asks, where do babies come from? Oh, here we have to have this conversation. And really the child was asking like something so generic, right? Like we're jumping into 4-year-old minds, 5-year-old minds, 10-year-old minds, and introducing things that are just way too heavy for them to carry. And I don't think it's respectful to the LGBT community either. Like, I think that this harms everyone. And, I'm thinking of some of my friends who are gay, and I think just like my husband and I have very different of opinions on things, even important things. I mean, sometimes the most important things we don't always see eye to eye on, right, with how we're raising our children. I was talking to my friend the other day. Her and her partner view things surrounding all of this in schools differently. So who are we to make decisions for families? Who are we to decide conversations that should be happening with children? Because even their parents have to work through that and have conversations, right? And this whole inclusive, I love people. I am passionate about people. It's probably the number one thing I'm passionate. I love people. I will talk to everyone and anyone. I go on walks with my friends and they're like, are you going to say hi to everyone on the trail? And I was like, yeah, get used to it, right? Like, I love people. I respect people. I want them to grow up and make their decisions and live their lives, and we can respect each other, right? Like, I look at my street and my closest friends who I spend time with, and just on my street, like literally within 15, 20 houses of me, I've got my friend from Malaysia that's Hindi. I've got my Jewish friend. The three of us walk together, right? I've got my atheist friend. I've got my gay friends, like, and we're a community.
I thought you had friends that were gay.
Friends that were gay, right? But that's the thing, like, why are we labeling everybody and everything? And I think this whole idea of being inclusive is beautiful, but when we're being inclusive by constantly pointing out our differences, we're doing the exact opposite. It's not inclusive, it's divisive. And back to your original question, I think the government and the school districts have no business getting into our personal lives and personal homes like that. And, if you're going to be there for my kid, because I have to accept as an adult, especially with my older kids, they're going to find trusted adults they're going to talk to about things before they're going to come talk to mom about it sometimes, because it takes some warming up, some comfort. But I would hope those trusted adults will be loving them. And I have those people in my life I'm so grateful for. I'm so grateful for the people who step in my kids' lives and can be there for them in ways that I'm not right now. But I also trust them, that they're encouraging them, like, hey, go talk to your mom. Go talk to your dad, right? Like, that's the encouragement that needs to be happening. And there are really incredible teachers that I know are safe places for these kids with all different of issues they're facing. But it's not their responsibility. And I also talk to the teachers. They don't want that weight. Of course, they're going to be there and see the needs of a student and reach out and help where they can. But they're going to bring parents into that conversation and say, hey, I see your kid struggling. How can I support you? And the parents will say, yeah, my kid's struggling with this. How can I support you as their teacher at school? And it's collaborative, and it's transparent, and it's filled with love. And like you're saying, if there are kids who are actually in danger or struggling, and you see signs of that, teachers have gone through those trainings. I've gone through hours of those trainings as a coach, mandated trainings. Like, if I see signs of abuse or neglect, or like, there are steps that I am obligated as a coach to take. And guess what? The step isn't getting personally involved. It is calling authorities. It is not I'm not a trained professional. I don't have that right. It's dangerous to me. It's dangerous to the child. So if there is a child that is in danger and is not safe, there are people to call. And like you said, that is the police. See, those things. So, I mean, that's a heavy one for me, because I love these students and I love these kids and I want them to feel supported and safe at school. But that is not the way to do it. And that's just a hill I will die on. It is not the school or district's place or teacher's place to be introducing these ideas to my children or to these students and running with it without the parent knowing. And it happened. I know I went for a walk with a friend, and she told me that her daughter was struggling in the middle school, right? This is a young child, because remember, middle school here starts. My daughter was, I have a couple late birthdays. Some of my kids are 11 years old, because middle school here starts at 6th grade. Where I grew up, middle school was 7th grade. Anyway, she starts noticing that her daughter's not doing well. She's losing weight, she's passing out, she's missing meals. Come to find out, she had been meeting with a counselor at the middle school regularly for about 6 months. And the parents were never made aware of this. But my friend is an incredible person and an incredible mom, and finally just talked to her child and said, hey, something's not right, and you're not thriving, and you're not doing well, and you need to start talking, or I'm pulling you from school. Starting Monday, you're homeschooled. And it took well into the middle of the night, the student started talking, opening up to the parents about how they've been bullied, about different things at school. And again, as soon as the parents were made aware, they wrapped their child in love, they supported her, they talked with her, and she started to do well again. Like, the schools, and I'm not saying, like, a lot of it could be well-intended, right? From these teachers and from these parents. I don't think Newsom's well-intended, but that's just a personal opinion. I think there's a lot of good intentions going to support these marginalized students. And that's a very emotional thing for me, because I care about them. But the methods are not working, and it's not safe. And anyone in their right mind that thinks putting a wedge in between parents and their children, think that's a benefit to society, think that's a benefit to the child or the family, it's pure evil, and it's wrong. Like, societies are better when families are united. Like, you want to make You want to make a community great? Start in your home. You want to make the country great? Start in your home. And I believe that with my entire being, and I will advocate for all of these kids, but that's not the way to do it. And yeah, sorry.
Thank you for coming today.
Thanks, Matt. I really appreciate it.